All right, so picture this. April 12th, 1981.
Okay.
Sheila Sharp, she's coming home to cabin 28
Right.
at the Keddie Resort
Right.
after a sleepover, right? And what she walks into is just unimaginable.
Yeah.
Her mother, Sue, her brother, John, and his friend, Dana Wingate, they've been brutally murdered.
Oh, my God.
Bound, stabbed, bludgeoned, like it's a scene of just absolute savage violence.
Wow.
And then here's where it gets really, really unsettling.
Okay.
Sheila's 12-year-old sister, Tina,
Yeah.
she's just gone,
What?
vanished, like no trace.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing. In the very next room, her younger brothers, right, and their friend,
Huh.
they're found completely unharmed, sound asleep. I mean, it's that stark contrast, that puzzle. That's what we're going to dig into today.
Yeah, it's chilling, that initial picture you paint, and it's chilling because of that exact thing, that juxtaposition. You've got
Yeah.
this extreme violence on one side and then just apparent peace, unawareness right next door, like you said. It tells you right away this isn't straightforward, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's layers here we got to peel back.
And this deep dive into the Keddie Cabin murders, this is happening because you, the listener, asked us to.
That's right.
You wanted to understand this case, this mystery that's decades old, and it still feels so raw. So we've sifted through the reports, the investigations, past, present, to bring you those crucial details, those surprising twists, and maybe even some of the lingering questions that just won't go away.
Yeah.
Because let's be clear, even now, new pieces of this puzzle keep turning up.
Yeah, and, for you listening, we know you want to get a grasp on this, thorough grasp, but you don't want to be overwhelmed, right?
Of course.
Buried in a mountain of information. So what we want to do is extract those key nuggets.
Right.
The stuff that makes you think, present it in a way that's clear. Maybe shed some light on this mystery that's gone on for so long.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, we are going to kind of piece together that initial discovery, the horrific discovery. We're going to look at how the initial investigation unfolded.
And where it seems to have stumbled, we'll delve into the primary suspects and, of course, the evidence that has surfaced around them, right?
Yep.
Over the years, and ultimately we're going to grapple with those questions, the really unsettling questions.
Yeah.
Keep the Keddie Cabin murders just in that realm of just enigmas.
Right.
Okay, let's start at the beginning
Right.
with what Sheila Sharp actually encountered that morning.
So the scene she walked into, it was gruesome, truly gruesome.
Yeah.
In the living room, she found Sue, John, and Dana, and they had been bound with medical tape, which is interesting because reportedly that wasn't usually in the cabin. And also electrical cords. I mean, the level of violence was extreme. All three of them had been stabbed, bludgeoned, and in Dana's case, there was evidence of strangulation as well.
Oh, wow.
Investigators, they noted, there was a bent steak knife on the floor.
Oh, God.
And even more chillingly, a bloodied butcher knife and a claw hammer were found together on a small table near the entrance to the kitchen.
Those bindings are particularly disturbing.
Well,
They
these-
are. Right. Medical tape, it's like out of place.
Right.
And then the electrical cords, I mean, to restrain them.
Right.
And then Sue,
Yeah.
she was found partially nude,
Oh, right.
gagged with a blue bandana, and her own underwear, which was secured with even more tape. And then there's this detail that it sticks with you. There was an imprint on the side of her head that matched the butt of a Daisy 880 pellet gun.
A pellet gun.
Yeah, why a pellet gun?
That's strange. Why a pellet gun? It does raise questions. It suggests a weapon of opportunity, maybe.
Right.
Or even, a deliberate act of further violation.
Wow.
And the blood spatter analysis,
Yeah.
that was telling too. It indicated that while the murders likely happened in the living room,
Yeah.
all that blood that was found in various locations, including on the victim's feet and even in Tina's room, strongly suggests they were moved after they were killed.
Oh, my gosh.
Think about that. I mean, it points to calculation beyond just the violence.
So then there's the mystery of Tina. Initially, it wasn't a murder investigation.
right.
It was a missing person case.
Yeah.
FBI got involved. The fear was abduction. It wasn't until 3 years later,
Oh, wow.
April 1984, that her skull and other remains were found in Butte County,
Okay.
which is 50 to 62 miles away from Keddie.
That's significant distance.
It is. It's a significant distance.
Yeah.
And what's even more fascinating, honestly kind of unsettling, is what happened shortly after the announcement of Tina's remains being found.
Okay.
So the Butte County Sheriff's Office, they get this anonymous 911 call.
Okay.
The person on the other end of the line correctly identifies those remains as Tina's.
Ah.
Now, here's the crucial thing.
Yeah.
This call wasn't documented at the time.
Really?
It wasn't until years later, 2013, that the recording of this call was found.
Wow.
Almost by accident, tucked away in an evidence box.
Seriously?
But someone knew, and someone tried to tell anonymously why. And why wasn't this call looked at back then?
Yeah, that's wild. Someone out there had a key piece of the...
Right.
And it's like, it went unnoticed for decades. That's crazy.
And then you have Rick and Greg,
Right.
Sue's younger sons,
Yeah.
and their friend, Justin Smart.
Right.
They were in a bedroom right next to this whole horrific scene.
Yeah.
And they were found completely unharmed.
Like they slept through it.
Seemingly having slept through the whole thing, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
It really is. It strains credulity, doesn't it? That detail alone has fueled so many theories.
Of course.
And speculations over the years. How could that much violence be happening so close and these kids don't hear or see anything? Any explanation you can come up with for this case has to address that.
Exactly. Which brings us to the initial investigation.
Right.
By the Plumas County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And it's fair to say that right from the beginning, their work faced some scrutiny.
Yeah, scrutiny. That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
The handling of that crime scene was heavily criticized. There were reports that it wasn't properly secured.
Right.
Which means you got to think about evidence contamination.
Right.
That's a real possibility. And then, like we said before, the failure to realize that Tina was missing in those first few crucial hours.
Yeah.
It's a huge oversight, a troubling oversight.
Definitely.
Justin Smart himself, he told officers that responded that Tina wasn't there.
Really?
But his statement, it seems like it was dismissed or maybe ignored in the chaos.
And Justin's story,
Right.
it doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
His account of that night changed over time.
Okay.
Initially, he corroborated the younger Sharp boy's story, saying he was asleep, heard nothing.
Okay.
But that account shifted.
Okay.
Later, Justin started describing having a dream about the murders.
Hmm.
And then, under hypnosis,
Oh.
he offered a much more detailed narrative, claiming to have seen Sue with two men, a fight breaking out, and Tina being taken outside.
So under hypnosis, I mean, the thing is, the use of hypnosis in eyewitness testimony, it's controversial, right?
Right.
Because it can lead to false memories.
Yeah, and it gets even more questionable.
Okay.
Based on this hypnotized account, composite sketches of two potential suspects were created.
Uh-huh.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
These sketches, they were done by someone with absolutely no artistic ability and no training in forensic sketching.
Oh, wow. So why wasn't a professional brought in for something like that?
Right.
That seems like a really critical thing to get right.
Yeah, and that's a question that continues to be a major point of contention.
Sure.
And it casts a shadow over those initial efforts. The sketches themselves, they were really vague. They provided very little in the way of concrete identifiers. Two men in their late 20s, early 30s, one with dark blonde hair, the other with black slicked back hair, both reportedly wearing gold-framed sunglasses. I mean, how much could investigators really do with that?
Not a lot. That's not very descriptive.
Right. We also have the account from the neighbors in cabin 16.
Okay.
They said they heard muffled screams around 1:15 a.m.
Okay.
That's a pretty specific time
Yeah,
frame.
it is.
Yet the boys in cabin 28, they maintained they heard nothing.
That's really hard to reconcile.
Right.
Were the walls that soundproof? Or was someone not telling the whole story?
A huge discrepancy.
It is. It really makes you question the timeline.
Yeah.
And it makes you question those testimonies. I mean, were the boys somehow just blocked from hearing this brutal attack? Or were those statements just not completely accurate?
So who became the focus of the investigation? We know two names kept popping up. Martin Smart, who was Justin's stepfather,
Okay.
and the Sharps' neighbor, and his friend, a man known as Bo Bubaid.
Right. So Marty Smart, he quickly became a person of interest.
Yeah.
There was information suggesting he had resentment towards Sue, reportedly because she interfered in his marriage with Marilyn.
Oh.
And Bo Bubaid, an ex-convict, he was staying with Marty at the time.
Oh, wow.
So they were close to the victims, potential motives.
Right.
It made sense for investigators to look at them closely.
And then there's that letter. Shortly after the murders, Marty writes a letter to his wife, Marilyn, and the content is chilling.
What did it say?
He stated that he had bought her love
Oh, God.
with 4 people's lives.
Ah.
Initially, Marilyn said she didn't remember getting this letter, but later she recognized his handwriting.
So that's potentially huge. Why wasn't more made of this at the time?
It's a huge piece of evidence.
It is. It's deeply incriminating, and the fact that it was sort of overlooked or not given enough weight in the investigation, that's another criticism, a statement like that. So soon after the crime, it should have been a major focus.
And then to add to this,
Yeah.
you have the testimony from Marty Smart's therapist.
Oh.
The therapist claims that Marty confessed to killing Sue and Tina,
Oh, wow.
but specifically denied any involvement in the deaths of the boys, stating that Tina was killed to prevent her from identifying him. But this alleged confession, it was initially dismissed.
Really? Dismissed as what?
As hearsay.
That's surprising. So why dismiss such a serious claim so quickly?
Right. It raises questions about what was prioritized.
Right.
And what was kind of brushed aside.
Sure. And while hearsay, it has its limits in court,
Of course.
a therapist reporting a confession like that, multiple murders, you'd think that would at least trigger further investigation.
Right.
At least see if it's true or not.
Right. And then you have the case of the missing hammer.
Okay, the hammer, what about it?
Marty Smart himself, he said that his claw hammer had gone missing
Okay.
around the time of the murders.
Right.
Fast forward to 2016, a hammer matching that description, so steel, blue-handled claw hammer.
Yeah.
It's discovered in a pond near the Keddie property decades later.
Wow, decades later. That's a long time.
Right. And the investigators believe it was intentionally placed there.
So what do we make of this timeline then?
Right. The hammer reappearing after so many years
Yeah.
in a place that suggests it was deliberately hidden.
Yeah.
It's suspicious. It aligns with his statement about the missing hammer, and it just adds another layer of intrigue.
It really does. And the investigators saying they think it was put there intentionally decades later
Right.
implies someone knew about that original investigation and about Marty's statement.
Right. Let's shift to Boobied for a second.
Okay.
So we know he was an ex-con,
Right.
and there were even whispers of him having ties to organized crime in Chicago.
Okay.
And it seems like his interactions with investigators weren't exactly straightforward.
So what happened?
He gave them several inaccuracies in his statements,
Like what?
including things about his past employment and the nature of his relationship with Marilyn Smart.
So these inconsistencies, they weren't really checked out.
Right. They weren't thoroughly checked and followed up on at the time.
Okay. So again, that points to those issues with the investigation.
Yeah.
You've got a potential suspect giving false information. You got to dig deeper.
Exactly. Now let's fast forward to 2018. This is when a big announcement was made about new DNA evidence.
Oh, wow. So this felt like a turning point for a lot of people.
It did. It really did. Investigators announced that they had recovered DNA from a piece of that medical tape that was used to bind the victims.
Right.
And this DNA matched a suspect who was alive at the time of the announcement.
Wow. So that reignited things.
Yeah.
It really did. And it suggested that maybe people beyond just Smart and Boobaid were involved.
Right.
Directly involved in the violence. So what happened with this evidence?
Let's go back to that anonymous 911 call.
Okay, about Tina's remains.
Right.
Yeah.
The person who made that call, they had specific knowledge.
They did.
And the fact that the recording was only rediscovered years later, is buried in the evidence files,
Right.
it feels like another missed opportunity.
It does. It really does. The person who made that call, they knew something about Tina and where she was, and they chose to be anonymous, and then the recording gets mishandled. It raises a lot of questions. Were they afraid? Were they involved, but wanted to give something away without getting themselves in trouble?
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that it wasn't looked at more closely in the beginning, it's baffling.
So what were the motives? What theories have kind of gained traction over the years? Because it feels like there are a few competing ideas.
Right. So the most prominent theory early on was about a love triangle involving Marty Smart, his wife Marilyn, and Sue Sharp.
Okay.
The idea was that there was an affair going on between Marty and Sue, and that Sue was telling Marilyn to leave Marty, who she said was abusive.
Oh, wow.
So the theory is that Marty, maybe with Boobied's help, he targeted Sue in a fit of rage, jealousy, something like that.
And that theory could explain why Marilyn left Marty the day the bodies were found.
It could.
It could also explain why the younger boys were spared.
Right, because the focus of Marty's anger, if that's the case, would have been Sue.
And it gives a really disturbing context to that letter.
It does, yeah. However, as time has gone on and more has come out, some investigators looking back at this, they've leaned towards a different motive, something bigger.
Okay.
This involves the idea of drug smuggling. The theory suggests that Marty, who we know was involved with drugs in some way, and Boobaid with his alleged ties to organized crime in Chicago, and their interest in drug distribution might have been part of something much bigger, a bigger criminal enterprise.
And this darker theory, it suggests that Sue
Yeah.
and maybe John and Dana, they stumbled upon something, or they interfered with this operation,
Right.
leading to that extreme reaction.
Yeah, and some people who support this theory, they believe that the mishandling of the investigation
Right.
by the local law enforcement, maybe even the Sacramento Department of Justice,
Right.
could be explained if there were corrupt officials involved protecting this network.
Wow.
It's a more complex theory, more unsettling theory.
Definitely.
But it tries to address those inconsistencies, those failures in the initial investigation.
Right.
And the fact that the organized crime unit, not just homicide detectives,
Yeah.
were sent to the scene initially, has always seemed strange, and maybe it supports this idea.
So we know that in recent years,
Yeah.
Sheriff Hagwood
Mm-hmm.
and Investigator Gamberg
Mm-hmm.
have really dedicated a lot of effort to this case.
They have.
And it sounds like for them, it's not just another cold case, it's personal.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Sheriff Hagwood actually went to school with Johnny and Dana.
Oh, wow.
And he even worked alongside them when they were teenagers. And his own mother was Tina's teacher.
Oh, my gosh.
He even has a childhood connection to Cabin 28 itself.
Really?
And then you have Investigator Gamberg, who knew the boys because he was their martial arts instructor.
Wow.
Those personal ties,
Yeah.
they fuel their determination to find some closure for this horrific crime. It makes it more than just a case file for them. And
Absolutely.
it's deeply personal.
And both Sheriff Hagwood and Investigator Gamberg,
Yeah.
they've said publicly that they believe there are people alive
Hmm.
who know what happened that night
Right.
and who were involved in the disposal of Tina's remains.
Okay.
They've even indicated that they feel they've identified some of these individuals
Wow.
and that they're optimistic that they will eventually get a resolution.
So that renewed sense of hope
Yeah,
after so long
Yeah.
must mean a lot to the families and the community.
absolutely. That renewed commitment from them,
Yeah.
along with the emergence of new evidence,
Yeah.
like the DNA
Uh-huh.
and the 911 call,
Yeah.
it gives a sense that answers might be possible.
It really does, even after all this time, and it speaks to how persistent those people are to keep looking for justice.
There's one final detail that just seems really significant when you put everything together.
Okay, what is it?
There were no signs of forced entry.
So whoever did this, they either knew the victims or they were let inside.
Exactly. That changes things, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It suggests some level of familiarity or
Yeah.
trust, at least at the beginning,
Yeah.
between the victims and whoever did this. It narrows down the suspects quite a bit.
Right. To those who had a connection to Sue, John, and Dana.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
That's it.
recap what we've talked about, we started with Sheila's horrific discovery,
Right.
Keena's disappearance,
Yeah.
the fact that the younger boys were unharmed.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the crime scene,
The details.
the details, the investigation, how it was criticized,
Right.
and that early focus on Marty Smart and Bo Bubuday, including that incriminating letter and what the therapist said.
Right. And the hammer.
Oh, and the hammer. Right. We also talked about the discovery of the hammer
Decades later.
decades later.
Yeah.
The new DNA evidence from 2018,
Right.
the anonymous 911 call, and those two main theories about the motive, the love triangle, and the potential drug operation. And finally, we talked about the renewed efforts by those investigators
Who have a personal connection.
who have a personal connection
Yeah.
to the victims and their optimism that maybe this will be solved.
And we talked about that lack of forced entry, which really points to a connection between the victims and whoever killed them.
Exactly. Which leaves us and you, our listeners, with so many questions.
Right.
What really happened inside that cabin that night? How could such violence happen so close to those kids and they heard nothing?
Who made that call about Tina, and what was their connection? What does that DNA evidence really mean, and will it lead to an arrest, to some justice? And could the way the investigation was handled, could it point to something bigger, something darker going on?
These are the questions that keep people interested in this case.
Yeah.
And they're the questions that keep driving those people dedicated to solving it. The Keddie Cabin Murders are a stark reminder of what these unsolved violent crimes do to families and communities. The impact just doesn't go away.
This case, it really marked the community of Keddie.
It did.
And the fact that they're still investigating.
With new information coming out, it suggests that the full story,
Mm-hmm.
however devastating it might be,
Right.
might actually come to light someday.
You know, these unsolved mysteries, like this one,
Yeah,
they speak to our need for the truth
definitely.
and for justice to be served.
Right.
We keep searching for answers. Even after all these years, it makes you think about how heavy these unsolved tragedies are, and it gives you hope that one day the full story will be told.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Sounds good.